All right, Nolan, we are ready to go, my friend. It's all yours.
All right. Okay, I think we need to begin with a roll call. Call this meeting to order. Begin with a roll call. Let's see. So Caitlin Hedberg. Looks like she's not here. Lindsay Hobson.
I'm here.
Tasha Hodge.
Here.
Yep, I see Tasha. There we go. Lindy. Lindy's not here. Jonathan.
Here.
Carla.
She was here. I saw her on a minute ago.
Yeah. Maybe she'll be back on. Jimmy.
I'm here.
All right, very good. Thank you, everybody. And then, I don't see Alyssa's name here, but I think Alyssa.
I'm here.
There we go. Oh yeah, at the top. Sorry. Okay, so let's see if everyone's had a minute to review the agenda. I'd entertain a motion to approve.
I'll move to approve.
Is there a
I'll
second?
second that.
All right. And if there's no opposition, then I think we can proceed. Right. Then I think we're going to kick things off. It looks like we've got Suzanne LaFrance from the Assembly on, I think, and I don't think Cameron is on, right? But yes, Ms. LaFrance, do you have anything you want to update us on from the Assembly standpoint? I think there's been a few things going on lately, huh?
Yes, a few things. Thank you, Mr. Chair. First, I wanted to mention that Chris Constant and I have an AO that would bring e-cigarettes and vaping products under the tobacco excise tax, and that is expected to be introduced for the August 11th meeting. And we've been working closely with the administration because they're obviously very busy, and there were some things that Treasury needs to work out in order for this to move forward. Essentially, this would end what's an exemption really for those tobacco products, because e-cigarettes being relatively new were not included in the original definition. And then I think you all are aware that we have some alcohol tax town halls this week. We had the first one on Tuesday, and there is another one tonight. And during those town halls, we have had a presentation from different members from the various committees like homelessness and public safety and health policy on the proposed spending allocation. And in my role with Ms. Quinn Davidson in the health policy committee as chairs, we've proposed about 30% towards prevention and early intervention. And I think right now, we haven't debated obviously, but one proposal is to split across the three categories of public safety, prevention, early intervention, and then homelessness shelter, like a pretty even split across those. But more to come on that, some good feedback from the public at the town hall. And then finally, just wanted to mention about the CARES Act funding, and I saw from Lance's email that you all know that there is going to be a special meeting of the Assembly tomorrow to approve the $7 million to release for small businesses. And I wanted to mention that last night, John Wendelton and I had a town hall to talk about CARES Act funding with our constituents in District 6, and that's South Anchorage, Girdwood, and Turnagain Arms. And we heard very loudly that there's a lot of frustration, especially from the small business owners, with rules surrounding the relief money. And one small business owner said, since the pandemic started, she's gotten $1,000, which is just not adequate for her to continue. And as you all know, Girdwood has been hit really, really hard as far as the impact to tourism. And actually, we had a gentleman speak last night on behalf of the hospitality industry and also all businesses and tourism-related businesses in general, that they are proposing an allocation of $15 to $20 million in CARES Act funding for business relief, especially for the hospitality industry, because of Emergency Order 15. And that is just for the month of August. That's an estimate on the cost for that segment that sector to survive. So I am very interested in listening to the thoughts of the commission and hearing your feedback, as I know you all work really closely in these areas. But those are the three big items. Thank you so much.
Thanks. Thank you very much, Ms. LaFrance. Questions on the assembly from BAC members?
Mr. Chairman, I just have a comment, if I could, for the commission and for the Assembly Member LaFrance.
Please.
Suzanne, I found a copy of the resolution that's on the Assembly agenda for Tuesday night, recommending a framework for the allocation of the COVID relief funds. I know that the Budget Advisory Commission has had some presentations not only on the use of the CARES Act funds but also the alcohol tax, and I sent it to them just about 45 minutes ago. I just noticed it was on the agenda. Is there anything that you'd like to say about this? Maybe summary of some of the work sessions that you had, because I think the Assembly is prepared to act on this or considering acting on this resolution on Tuesday night.
Thanks, Lance. We have had some, as I think some of you know, some all-day work sessions specifically on the CARES Act funding and setting up a framework of priorities. And I think you sent that out, Lance.
Yes.
Right? That,
Can you guys see my screen?
No, we can't.
All right, let me see if I can make that happen. Go ahead, Suzanne, and I'll try to get my screen to work.
Okay. Well, and I think that's the colorful graphic you're going to bring up.
Yep.
Where we identify, see if I can pull it up online. Okay. Where we identify the priority areas, economic stimulus being at the top of the list, followed by family support, housing and homelessness, public health and safety, community investment, direct municipal response, and then setting aside a contingency fund since we don't know what's coming. And then the second aspect of that framework is the timeline, looking at, is this short term, addressing immediate needs, what do we need to do to respond right now, what other deadlines and requirements must be addressed, and that's primarily in reference to the money needing to be expended by the end of the year, and then a long-term transformative aspect, what are the longer-term systemic changes demonstrated by the pandemic, how can the COVID-19 responses make MOA a better place for all in the future but are not immediate needs, how can we tie to existing MOA partner plans priorities, and what response activities focus on prevention and sustainability. And then finally, some guiding principles that we agree that in terms of one need, it needs to be directed to the populations that's needed most and those impacted heaviest. And then geography, we want the aid to have a positive impact across communities and aligning with other opportunities and addressing resource gaps. Also considering feasibility in terms of timing especially, and then being informed using recent data, public input where possible, and then equity, considering equity and historical inequities in our system. So this is the framework. And for Lance, did you share the Excel spread?
Not yet. I was going to do that next.
Okay. And I think that's very useful in the discussion because it shows what is being proposed for spending that $156 million. And it's not firm. Clearly that we're still gathering information. And in fact, after yesterday's meeting that John Weldson and I had, people really felt strongly that how we had allocated or proposed to allocate the funds did not reflect the highest priority of economic stimulus. And that we heard very loudly that a much bigger portion ought to be directed towards the business community. And I know that there's some concern among assembly members that, and I believe today the state just released $290 million. Let's see here. I just got a notice actually that the application is live for the State of Alaska CARES Grant Program for businesses that have received less than $5,000 in federal relief funds. But there is concern by assembly members that the state needs to be distributing funding as well, and that we didn't necessarily want to do what they ought to be doing, even though it's very much recognized that the business community needs to have relief.
Thank you, Suzanne. Can you guys see my screen now, or no?
Yes, we can see it.
Okay. So I think that this is, I think this may be, yeah, this, thank you.
So this is Nolan again. Thanks for sharing all of this backdrop, Suzanne. The business, I think the business relief stuff is an interesting topic because there's this dance between federal sources, state sources, and local sources that's just been very out of step, and I can't say that it's necessarily anyone's fault. But that state relief program, the $290 million, is actually, they originally released that in May. I think at the very end of, I think it might have been like May 29th or some point at the end of May, and it's been beset with a lot of problems. They were overly strict about the requirements for it. They didn't have the capacity to process all those applications, and then they because of the state Supreme Court ruling, they were given the ability to bring some flexibility to the program, and it should be a little bit better now, but it's still, for businesses that have already received more than $5,000 in PPP or other sources, it doesn't, they wouldn't be eligible. I don't know if I know exactly what the answer should be, but I think maybe some targeted relief for certain kinds of businesses that are the most badly affected is probably on point. The $7 million you mentioned, isn't that earmarked for restaurants, hospitality, or certain industries? Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
That's my understanding of what's before us tomorrow. I'll double check though here.
Through the chair, this is Alyssa Rodriguez. I have a follow-up question. Do you know the limits on the distribution of the $7 million? Like, what is the upper limit that a business can receive?
I do not. And maybe Lance, do you know? Because I understand that's largely coming from the administration.
I don't recall the numbers, Suzanne or Alyssa. I will send you guys a copy of it when we're done here. I think it's similar to some of the other programs for childcare and some other assistance where there's an initial cap, but I will send that to you. I don't recall.
Thank you. And then I had another question, if we have time for it.
Yeah, go ahead, Alyssa.
I was curious, when we're looking at the different priorities, the economic stimulus, family support, does the Assembly already have most of the funding kind of split out into the activities that you are looking to support, specifically thinking about economic stimulus, are we thinking, I guess the question is just, are all the dollars already earmarked, or is that part still up for comment and whatnot?
It's definitely up for comment. We do have an initial allocation, and I wish I could share this spreadsheet, and Lance, maybe you'd be able to share that with the commission members,
Okay.
because it shows, do you know which one I'm talking about? It's, I'll forward it to you.
Is it the one I shared with you guys?
It's an Excel spread with, I'll send you what the clerk sent to us. Oh wait, no, it's not that one.
Okay.
Okay, this one itemizes the allocation according to the different priorities in the framework, and parts of it are still awaiting more information. I mean, for example, I'll give you line 28 has awake domestic violence prevention and intervention, and that has a very, very rough placeholder of 500,000 because we are still gathering information. Because of social distancing, awake can't accommodate as many victims. And they also have a capital project underway that would expand their capacity. So while the details aren't firm, it's in here as a placeholder. And same with the Economic Resiliency Task Force suggestion or recommendation for a voucher program to cover gas, groceries, medicine, etc. We didn't have any data as to a sense of how much would be needed. We put down $1 million. And I know from talking with the administration, there are some issues with how to get that relief out to people. And we don't know, maybe that's something we won't be able to do, but for now it's on here. So yes, it is, there's fluidity to it, and we've broken out as well what we expect to fund out of the second 20 million payment and the third 20 million payment. And I'm going to go to my email now and send that to you, Lance, so you can share that spreadsheet.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, that would be really helpful to see that type of information. So I have another question for you, Ms. LaFrance. What the framework that was set up by Recover Alaska and by the various nonprofit organizations, the Children's Trust and others, with regard to the alcohol taxes, was there information? I mean, how much of that were you guys able to use? All of that, or did you feel like how helpful was it? I mean, I know it was very explicit in detail. How much of what they proposed do you feel like the Assembly is on task to enact?
Thanks for that question. And they did present at the town hall on Tuesday, and I know with the Health Policy Committee, we do have some synergies over most, I'd say 95% of what they proposed. There are just some smaller pieces maybe that we'll see if we can align. I'm not sure we'll be able to because, and on the public safety side, they presented to some degree their proposal on their own. We on the Health Policy Committee worked with the two co-chairs in the Homelessness Committee to align our proposal, and so I'd say we're mostly aligned with what Recover Alaska proposed, but we'll have to sit down and take a look. Sorry, that's it's not a real finite answer, Mr. Plowda.
Oh, no worries. I appreciate it. I know it's a pretty detailed proposal, so it'd be hard to actually line them up and point out the differences or similarities. I know is a little bit of a task.
Right, and maybe 90. Did I say 95%? Maybe that's too high. I mean, initially it looked like the allocations aligned very closely, with what two of the three committees, maybe the third. I haven't delved as deeply into the public safety aspect because I've been primarily focused on the health policy piece. But we'll be taking another look and working out and identifying where those gaps are and seeing if we can bridge them, because definitely we want to move forward in as aligned manner as possible to have maximum community support and to definitely respect what the public said too they wanted to see in those spending allocations.
Very good. So let's see. Do we have more questions for Ms. LaFrance from from BAC? If not, I do have one. It's in all of this, you know, the assembly's obviously having to make some, you know, pretty monumental decisions, and in all of this, where at this point in time, where can our guidance be the most effective, or where can our input help provide the most help to the assembly in navigating some of these decisions that have to be made, both with the CARES funding and alcohol tax proceeds and any of the above?
Thanks, Mr. Sada. Great question. In respect to the CARES Act relief funding, I think taking a look at that spreadsheet of proposed allocations and ensuring that we have identified the areas that need relief, to looking at those amounts to see if they're consistent with any data you may have. I mean, I will be honest, I don't necessarily have access to analysts, and my preference would be to be data informed, but I don't know how to quantify the impact on the hospitality industry, for example. And I know they'll be coming forward with a $15-20 million proposal with a formula. So, and some of you are economists and analysts, and so when you have that kind of data and can help us identify specific amounts or ways in which to address those areas with targeted relief, I think that would be very helpful. The other piece, as far as the alcohol tax, and you all were considering doing a resolution, is that correct? I know you have so much on your plate, and first of all, thank you for all the work you're doing. I know you've been really involved with working closely with the department on, you know, this next budget cycle, and this is a particularly unique and challenging one, what with considerations of the alcohol tax and COVID-19 relief. But were you all doing a resolution with recommendations for the alcohol tax revenue?
Yes, we did let's see, we did do a work session about it, and we were going, yes, we have been planning to mull over some kind of a resolution, and I suppose the timeliness of that is pretty important right now.
Well, we're definitely moving forward, but I think, like, this is a great time. You know, we're soliciting feedback from the public, and definitely would like to hear your recommendations on the use of those funds. And I know in a previous meeting, one of your commissioners had, you know, reiterated the importance of making sure that we fulfill the promises that are actually in code, right, to the community regarding how those funds will be spent. And, you know, one question had come up from someone about, well, how much should go to public safety and how much should go to homelessness? And, you know, so that wasn't part of the AO and, or wasn't part of what the voters voted on, and is very much a part of the discussion now. I always think that when it comes to prevention and early intervention, right, we hear that for every dollar invested, you save downstream $7 to $10, but it's very hard to back that up with data. I think just in general, people agree that prevention and early intervention is generally a good idea, and saves the money and you know, in terms of the value of human life too. But if you have, you know, if you all have data and information or recommendations and any of that, I think as an assembly member, it's very helpful to hear that.
Thank you. I think we can definitely mull that over and think about how we can provide some input there. So I appreciate that. And see, so we probably have to keep things moving along. But thank you very much for your participation today, Ms. LaFrance.
Thank you.
Thank you. I think Mr. Ratliff, I think you're up next if you have anything from the school district to update us on.
Thank you, Chair Cota. So, as by now you've probably heard, the district is going to open in a high-risk model where students are going back to school online. only. So that'll be within the parameters of 3 different kind of concepts. One would be like a virtual school where students are still tied to their neighborhood school, but they're doing their learning kind of at the times that they choose. Another model would be that they're enrolled just normally, and they'll be conducting online learning with their teachers, given at set times during the day, and have their own like homework and other assignments. And then the other option is the correspondence homeschool type option, and we've seen about 1,000 students migrate over to that option so far this year, or this fall. The biggest thing from a finance perspective is how we will get funded this fall with our OASIS count. We're expecting the online learning to at least go through the first quarter. That's kind of high probability at this point. So our online enrollment to date compared to the previous couple of years is about 5,000 lower than what we've experienced generally. And we don't really know why this is, whether it's folks that have actually moved out of state or moved school to private schools, or just haven't enrolled yet just due to uncertainty of how it's going to look or what options they want to actually choose. So that's the biggest thing we're monitoring, and then whether the revenue adjustments we may have to make at that point. There's been some conversation going back with the state about could you fund us based on last year's ADM so we have some certainty, or fund us based on what we've submitted our projections to the state. So those questions have been asked. We haven't got any decision yet, but we're certainly likely to see have some conversation with the state regarding that. Just kind of for what it's worth, though, there is a hold harmless provision in state statute that will allow us, if we drop above 5% of our ADM, will be somewhat held harmless. So our maximum exposure on our revenue loss this year is about in the $18 to $20 million range before that hold harmless provision would kick in. At this point, we really don't know. It's kind of making us nervous about what that picture is going to look like, but we're tracking the best we can and just trying to get everything in place for when school does start in a live capacity where folks are actually in the buildings. So with that, take any questions if you have them.
All right, questions for Mr. Ratliff?
Yeah, this is Alyssa. I wanted to better understand when you were talking about the hold harmless, did you say you would incur potentially between an $18 to $20 million loss before that kicks in, or could you explain that a little bit more?
Sure. So the hold harmless provision in the foundation formula is, and it's based on the school size adjusted amount for the non-correspondent students. So in Anchorage, that's about 50,000 or 50,000 adjusted students for FY20. If we were to drop to 45,000 students, just based on our normal ADM in that amount, it would add back about 75% of that loss. So about 3,700 students or so we would get funding for. If we don't meet that 5% threshold, then, if we're under that 5% threshold, then we take the entire loss. So at some point in the formula, 1 or 2 students is going to make the difference between, a $4 million loss and a $20 million loss. So it's because there is that tipping point of you have to have above the 5% calculation.
Thank you. I appreciate that additional explanation.
Other questions for Mr. Ratliff? Okay. Seeing none. Thanks for the update. Thanks for being here.
Nolan, I'm sorry. I just thought of another question.
Oh, go ahead. Melissa.
I was curious, how is from your experience last year, kind of the end of last year, how was the school district doing in terms of substitute teachers and things like that? How did the funding for that work? Did you have less of them than you thought you would in terms of budgeting? And so looking forward this year, how do you think those sorts of things will be impacted?
Yeah, so we did have, for substitutes, that was one of our biggest categories. We had about, maybe $2 million in savings from that last quarter that we were close to. We weren't hiring substitutes. Where that kind of came back to get us was in the unemployment. You know, we're self-insured for our unemployment costs. So we got our fourth quarter bill a day or two ago, and it's in the $500,000 range. So, and primarily it's our subs and temps that were filing that because we weren't hiring them, or we weren't filling those positions because no one was, we didn't need them at that point. So we expect to have some savings in substitutes in the first quarter for this year, and then we had some savings in utilities because we weren't running garbage as often and using considerably less water, and we were able to turn the school buildings off for the summer earlier. So there are savings there, and then whatever unfilled positions we may have starting the year, which that's something we're still working out of what positions we may not hire out based on just retirements or folks moving out of state. So we're trying to categorize that savings, and then we'll present something to the school board on our August 18th Finance Committee meeting, and that's at, I want to say 2:30 or 3 on the 18th, and we can get you that information if anyone's interested in watching that presentation.
I think that'd be really cool to watch. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Okay, anything else for Mr. Ratliff? All right, thank you very much. Moving on, I think we've got some, Lance has several updates from OMB to share with us.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Andy. I'm going to go ahead and come back to this slide here regarding the Federal CARES Act funding. If I haven't already sent this to you, I will do this. I prepared this for the Assembly for their first work session on CARES Act, and can everyone see the screen?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, we're seeing the spreadsheet right now. Is that
Yeah.
what you're wanting to show?
Yep, the spreadsheet. So what this is, and I will send it to you, it is a summary of all of the COVID-19 funding from a variety, all different types of sources that have come into the municipality. We've been talking about this since about March or April, but these things are coming together. I'll just sort of highlight. So on the far left are the departments that either were the dollars are directed to. The next one is the source, whether it's for Medicaid or FEMA or the CDC. We have a variety of other things, and then sort of the grant name, and then the award status, if these are grants, the status of whether or not they are restricted for a particular purpose or they're unrestricted for a department, and then what the intended purpose or the spend of the grant, if it is a unsolicited grant that was received by the department, in this case for the fire department, number one, it's specifically for ground transportation of medical patients, and then whether or not it can be used for capital or operating, and then the amount of money on the award. So this one is $227,000, whether or not there was a start date or an end date included to it, and whether or not there was an assembly action. So in this particular case, Medicaid has told us you're going to get this money, but we actually haven't received the money and put it in the bank. And when we do that, the Assembly will accept the money through an appropriation, and that's what the to be determined. And some of these things we can see, like number 4 for the health department, we know that they're going to get some CDC money as it relates to COVID and emergency operations. We expect that the Assembly will actually accept that $474,000 in September. So that's what this sheet illustrates. I'll go to page 2. Number 11 is multiple. This is the CARES funds, that the $156 million that Assemblymember LaFrance was referring to, primarily on how that $156 million is getting moved forward. So we did receive that money from the state. It was awarded. It's $156 million. We have to report to the state monthly, and these are some of the things that were in play. So we had already committed about $23 million of it for small business, rental, child care relief, public lands, and the Assembly provided some contingency funds to the administration, and then we have a lot of things that are pending, one of those being the allocation of a portion of these funds to the 4 properties. And then, as Assemblymember LaFrance mentioned, And I think as Alyssa was asking, we haven't allocated all of these funds specifically, but there's a lot of ideas. And so as those things become mature, we will add those to the list. And then you can see there's a variety of others. There's FEMA funds that are COVID related. These are the things that are operating the EOC. And so then the last page, I think, the last page is both Transit and Merrill Field received a large resource of infrastructure funds or for COVID. They can use it for capital or operating. And Merrill Field had provided an outline of how they wanted to spend the funds over the next 5 years for their capital and operating. And Transit is preparing that, and I think they have a work session scheduled next Friday to share that with the Assembly. So I just wanted to let you guys know this is a very high level of all of the money that's come in the door to the municipality. So right now it's $210 million. Again, some of it is specific to departments for a particular purpose, and 156 of that 210 is for the CARES Act that we got from as a portion from the state. So I thought I'd sent this to you, but I was just thinking about it as I was sitting down that I need to send it to you, and I will do that. But it's just a good reference in case you're asking or interested.
Thank you, Lance. I think that, yeah, I've actually been wanting that kind of information.
Yep, I will do that. I would do it now, but my skill set is limited while I'm riding solo right now without Lila. So I don't want to risk trying to get change. But I will send it to you.
Thank you.
Okay. The next thing I have, unless you have questions.
Any questions for Lance on this portion?
All right. The next thing I want to share with you is, I wish I could get this a little bigger. Well, I'm not going to play with it. But so this is a budget to actuals report. We send this to the Assembly every month, and then we send quarterly. When the quarters of the year end, we send this to the Assembly that includes the utilities. So I'm going to highlight a couple things of what you're looking at here. It's been a while since we've looked at one of these. So on the left-hand side are the departments. The next column is the 2020 revised budget. This is the budget that was adjusted as of April. And then if the department received any supplementals since the approved budget, this $4.8 million, what that money is that 2 years ago, we set aside $7.9 million in the CFO's office to help manage the expenses of the transaction of ML&P, whether it be for legal services, accounting services, GIS, auditing, or whatever it might be, particularly related to that. This is the balance that was left over when we came into 2020. And then there's notes for each one of these on the bottom about what it's for. So the next, Courtney just jumped in here and made my life a lot easier. Thank you, Courtney. So the next column is what the budget is with the additions. This actual is as of the end of April, how much they have actually spent, and this is for labor and non-labor. This tells you how much is spent. If they've set aside money, encumbered it, for example, the Assembly, this money is not cash out the door yet, but it's encumbrances that they have set aside for contracts they have in place or whatever it might be. Then you can see the total percent of the budget spent and encumbered. So the Assembly, as of the end of April, we were 33% through the year, but 54% of their budget was either spent or encumbered. So that's what this first page looks like, and again, we'll make this available to you. I'm going to go to the next page, I think. All right, this one here is a breakdown of the labor and the non-labor. And at the end of the day, this side of the table, at the end of April, payroll's about 2 weeks behind. So when you look at the bottom line, when payroll was 30% through the year, our departments are about 1% higher than that amount. There's probably some overtime in there. The right side of the table is all non-labor. So at non-labor, they've spent 21%, they've encumbered 15 or 16%. So on their non-labor side, spent and encumbered, they're 36%. So when you look at their total labor and their non-labor for all of the departments, we're doing pretty good. We're running a little bit hot in some areas, but nothing's really alarming right now. As you look through some of these things, you'll see that the assembly looks like they're way overspent. It's because they've already done their elections. When you look at Mr. Schutte at Economic and Community Development, it's because he's basically paid all the contracts for our civic and arts and cultural centers. And then you go down here, the big ones that we always keep an eye on are fire. So fire, while their labor is pretty darn close, it's running a little bit hot, and you look at their non-labor, overall they're not, they look pretty good. And then police is another big one. So again, this is on the assembly, it's just information. In summary, right now we're not seeing any surprises. We're really keeping an eye on fire and police. And the health department. The health department has spent a lot of money on overtime this year, which leads me to the next couple pictures here. This is a graph of how the labor is doing. This is where they should be at this time of the year, and you can see how people are running on their labor or their non-labor. The CFO, there's only 4 people or 3 people in the office, so if they're running a lot of overtime, they're going to be running hot. This is the non-labor. You can see and a lot of this is encumbrances. So you can see that contracts where this is where they should be, this is where they are. So I don't expect these numbers will change a lot. I expect the bar to continue to rise. And so when we get to the end of the year, they're going to be looking pretty good. And then this next one is we report on overtime. This is particularly related to overtime. I'm not going to go through each one of these, but I will point out that the health department, they've spent basically $14,000 on overtime, and they budgeted $10,000 on overtime. So it looks that they're running hot, but their labor budget's actually doing pretty good. So again, it's just information. There's not action. I'll share this with you electronically, and then as a note, when we built the adjustment to the budget, we removed everyone's travel budget. So they had some departments that had been spent, and so they basically are having to absorb those costs inside their other non-labor budgets. But they had spent little under $60,000 for that. So that's where we are budget to actuals. Overall, we're doing pretty good. The controller's office is closing their monthly actual spend with departments. I think May is just about done, or may be done, and then June is coming up. So really no surprises on the budget to actuals for 2020. So, if you guys have questions on this one, let me know, and I will, again, share this with you. If it's something of interest, I think the quarterly reports are more valuable.
Yeah, Lance, I think at some point kind of recently you guys, OMB, sort of updated how you share the burn rates and the budget to actuals with the assembly. And so I think if I understand correctly, this reflects some kind of reconfiguring how you do that type of reporting, right?
We tweaked it a little bit, that's right, Mr. Chairman. We also share this as it becomes available at their Budget and Finance Committee meeting.
Right. Very good. So questions on this for Lance?
All right.
Okay. Not seeing any right now.
Item 5C3, I don't have a presentation for you, but I will verbalize it. So let's talk about the capital budget. So we have received all of the project suggestions for the 2021 budget. Collectively, the entire ask was almost $120 million in bonds. So we're not going to be anywhere near that. So the administration is narrowing that down right now. we've got a little bit of guidance from the mayor about where his priorities are, and some of that has to do with the health department, and he really wants to do some things on solar energy. He also wants to figure out some what we can do to make some adjustments in our overall fleet, both for APD and AFD. And maybe at another presentation I can give you guys some information we've got from maintenance and operations. But suffice it to say that I think for the majority of our APD fleet, our general government fleet, and our heavy equipment fleet, it is more than 50% depreciated in every category, and some of it's 60% depreciated. So the mayor is interested to figure out how we can start shoring that up a little bit. To this end, I will be at the Planning and Zoning Commission on Monday night. We typically, as part of the Planning and Zoning Commission's role to review the capital program, we go through a list of the types of projects the departments are asking for. I can certainly share that with the Budget Advisory Commission. I was taking a look at the map that our GIS people are preparing for me now, and as soon as that's available, I'll be sending it to the Planning Department and to the Planning and Zoning Commission. This is not an action item for them. It's sort of a peek at what the departments are asking for in their capital budget. There is no priorities, there's no decisions, and there's no money added to any of these things. It's just the types of projects they're looking at. They will get a chance to look at it and act formally in October once the mayor is done reviewing it. But over the years, this step with planning and zoning has been pretty successful, because that way when they see it in October, they've already had an hour or an hour and a half of a rundown of the kind of projects that are in there, and certainly something I can share with you guys. We can talk about that at September, or if you guys want to have a separate work session prior to that, we can talk about that as well. And the Planning and Zoning Commission is, like all of the current public meetings, they're available. We'll be doing it through Teams or OnBase. I'm not quite sure which method, but that's where we are on the capital budget. Maybe if there's any questions on the capital budget, I'll entertain those before I go to the operating.
Yeah, Lance, the capital budget, you mentioned the original ask of $120 million, and that reflects a 2-year capital plan, correct?
No, that was a 1-year ask. So the departments put their requests together, and talking to the senior managers, their guidance to them was, don't for this process, we want you to tell us what you think your immediate needs are or your upcoming needs are. The municipality is not on a 2-year bond process. We are still asking for annual bonds. So the average amount of the bonds for the last 5 years under the administration has been right around $50 million for everything: roads, parks, facilities, police, and fire. So I won't be surprised if the target is somewhere close to that. I do not know what the mayor has not decided on what it's going to be. So it'll be less than half of what the requests are.
And is that typical, Lance? Like that the requests from the departments, obviously have to be culled down. Is it typical to get that high of a number?
I think this one is a little on the high end, but it's not uncommon to get a number in the $80 to $90 million requests.
Okay, excellent.
Yeah, there's some big capital requests in there. There's some requests in there for improvements to the health department building. There's some requests for improvements to some fire buildings, their fire department facilities. And then there is, I forgot the other really big, there's 3 really big facility asks. Obviously we will not be able to accommodate all of them. So the rest of the stuff looks pretty simple. Parks looks pretty similar. And again, when I send this to you, you'll get a sense of what the departments are looking at.
All right, thanks, Lance.
Mm-hmm. So on
you're going to keep rolling with
yes.
Operating?
So the operating budget, we have compiled all of the department requests right now. It's of all of the departments for everything. It's right around $20 million in additional above continuation budget. A significant portion of that is a request from the health department and the fire department. So we haven't, again, made any decisions on those things. OMB has not vetted all of them. We are still reaching out to departments on some questions that we have for them on the operating budget. And to that end, the mayor has asked that he spend some time with directors on their department budgets, and so we're setting those up right now, and it will be with the departments. And we had many departments, I think probably 6 or 7, that did not ask for any increases in their operating budget. They asked for a continuation budget, basically meaning no reductions in their department budgets. So I think we're working through that process. Our goal is to, after the mayor gets a chance to meet with department heads, he will be putting out what he calls a 120-day memo. It's really a reflection, and that goes out on the 1st of September. So that will go out before your next meeting, and it's a general characterization of how he thinks the 2021 budget will be built. It will also include some information in there about the utilities, and that memo is drafted in part where he's thinking right now. I think some of the comments that Assemblymember LaFrance mentioned are going to be relevant to the 2021 budget, and then we'll be putting that together. So I won't have much to share until I get through with the mayor and the senior staff on the 21 operating budget with the BAC. So I don't know if I'll be able to get much until probably the middle of September, and certainly after it gets submitted on October 1st.
All right.
I will just as a reminder, we are preparing a continuation budget. I think some of the big things that we are working on in OMB are with the sale of ML&P being done this year. We have some internal costs, operating costs that have in the past been supported by ML&P that won't be there anymore. We're working on how we do that. Obviously, the allocation of the alcohol tax and how it supports services in departments or programs in 21. We'll have to have that put together. The one of the ideas about the COVID funds, COVID-19 funds, the allocation of that this year, starting programs and continuing them next year, and how it's going to affect the end of 20 is going to help us build 21. We have a lot of things that we're working on inside 21, as it's going to be unique and challenging. It's going to be something. We did get some projections from Treasury about revenues for next year. I think in totality, when you look at bed tax and all of the other revenues that are coming in from departments, marijuana, gas, fuel, and you work that mix, they're anticipating somewhere around a $15 to $17 million reduction in revenue for 21. So we've got to put that in the mix as we're building this as well. So lots of moving parts. So we're putting that together, and again, we'll be meeting with the mayor, and hopefully we can share something with the BAC, possibly in late September, and certainly after the 1st of the year, or after 1st of October.
Lance, a question for you. So the CARES money, the 156 million, I guess the money that comes through the state to the muni.
Yes.
That money obviously has to be spent by the end of the year. Now, if that money offsets money that would normally be spent in general government, normal operating budget, it could leave a surplus in an operating surplus at the end of the year. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And what would happen with that operating surplus? Would that just roll into reserves, or is it just Assembly's discretion, or what would happen there?
It would roll into reserves, and if it does that, and it's not spent, we would use that to figure out how we make sure that 2021 ends on or 2020 ends on a balance year, because we have to have an end of year and a balanced budget. So, and then if we have those reserves, we'll also be allocating some of those for 2021. But to your point, the answer is yes. If we can use the CARES funds to offset some budget expenses we had in 20, then those funds will stay in reserves, and then they can maybe cover shortfalls in other places and potentially help us get to a balanced budget in 21. So that too is in the mix.
Excellent, excellent. And I do understand too, and I haven't been following the news the last few days, but I believe that the Senate version, the U.S. Senate version of the HEALS Act or whatever it's called, would allow state and local governments to greater flexibility for the use of their CARES funding. So it could cover, I believe, including revenue shortfalls. But I don't know where that's going to stand or where that's going to come out in the negotiations with the House version.
I would agree, and I think it's not only going to be important here, but I think the current CARES Act really limits the ability for revenue shortfalls on utilities. And I think maybe Lindsay can appreciate this as working at a utility with people staying at home, at least in the commercial area. AWU is not, folks aren't using as much water as they were before, and maybe in Lindsay's line of work, they're not using as much gas as they were before, and it really is affecting the revenue stream coming into the utility. And that too has its trickle-down effects about their ability to meet dividend requirements, to actually meet their capital needs, maintain their reserves, their debt-to-equity ratio. So they got a lot of work. So that HEALS language in the new federal legislation could, it would really help states and local communities, but I think it would also support, help utilities, because right now it's restricted under CARES.
Very good. Then let's see. So with that, Lance, are we ready to move on to our summary of our department meetings, or some quick thoughts that we can each share?
Yeah, that would be great. I just want to maybe start by saying again, thank you. I was surprised, or is not the right word, but I was very pleased and very appreciative of the thought that the BAC members went. I learned something in each one of those things, and I hope that you did too. So, not in any particular order. I just put them in alphabetical order for the departments that they want to kind of share. And I think I sent you maybe 2 or 3 points that if we could just summarize those. And if we want to go in that order, then Jonathan would be first.
Oh man, I did not see that one coming.
Well, you can go, Nolan, you can go in whichever order you want.
No, I'll go, but I do want to know that the fact that I was able to unmute myself quickly means that I have been paying attention because my camera has not been on. So yeah, I had finance, and first of all, I want to thank Lance and the staff for setting that up, and the finance staff for taking the time. They were incredibly engaged. It was a great look inside of the finance department. What did I take away? For me, I'm connecting. I can't help but connect my day job, right, which is half coaching with the department, and I think that it's a great department. People are really engaged. They're very passionate about what they do. We're very lucky to have people that are so passionate and so knowledgeable. There is also this sense of tiredness, and I think that there's this just general sense of tiredness and fatigue across the community. And so I'm really interested to hear if you guys also pick that up within your departments. Is just people are a little worn at this moment. I heard something else that stuck with me is challenges in recruiting. Just like government actually, a couple years ago, government actually had the highest average age of any sector in the economy. and which means that now you've got the silver wave of retirements, and you've got that, plus you've got all the turmoil associated with the recession, and some of the sectors inside of the finance department are having trouble recruiting people into the department, and that's not unexpected. I've talked with other departments. Accountants in particular are in really high demand all across Anchorage, and it is tough to get qualified applicants that you want to build into your team, and so that's been a challenge. And I think I'm gonna stop there. Other than to just reiterate the thank you to the department staff and to acknowledge their hard work and dedication.
All right.
Thank you, Jonathan.
Nolan, would you mind if I go? I need to hop off the call here.
Go for it, Alyssa.
Thank you. So I got to talk with the port, and the port was absolutely amazing. And the director of the port started off by saying that the port is like crack. Like you get a little bit and you just can never leave it alone. Which, I don't know. I thought it was funny, and the more I learn about the port, the more I love it, so I thought it was mildly fitting. As someone who's never had crack before. But I was astonished, a couple things. I was astonished at the amount of work they're able to do with a relatively small staff. So I started out knowing very little about the port, but they've only got between 21 and 22 staff. They're a landlord port, and so they don't conduct commerce at all, but it's just the companies that come in and lease property that conduct all the commerce. They have 13 maintenance workers working 3 shifts, and just all the jet fuel that goes through there has been was interesting as well. That it's all of J Bear's fuel. It's half of what goes to Ted Stevens, all of what goes to Fairbanks, and that's been up recently. That both their fuel volumes had been up. Was interesting just in light of what's going on right now and the increase in e-commerce and those sorts of things. The port's self-sustaining was something else that came up, is that they pay the city for staff and for their use of folks in other departments, and that they're not a drain, so to speak, on the city, was something that Steve with the port really wanted to make sure that others knew. And so I kind of came at this in part as, how can we be an advocate for the port? How can we learn about what they do and help address some of what they've got going on over there? And the fact that they pay for themselves and the fact that they're able to do so much with so little were 2 big things that I came away with. And he really wanted people to know that, given the small staff they have over there, they're really a skookum group of people. They're not, kind of bumbling around and those sorts of things. They really know what they're up to. Let's see. Oh, we talked about, different ways of raising the money that the port needs. They have some pretty significant needs in terms of repairing and updating the port and those sorts of things. And we had a long conversation about how we have all these highway funds that are available. They're not available for the port, and so there are small pots of money out there at like a federal level that they're able to dip into, or at least apply for in some cases. But the idea that we can just raise the amount of money that we need by raising, dock and wharfage fees really is kind of untenable from Steve's perspective. That we're such a small group, relatively speaking, of Alaskans who would have to pay for that. The companies could always just tote mats, and those folks could always go to a different port, and so they really would just pass the costs along to us. And so it was interesting to kind of think of that as I was thinking about ways, to afford what we need for the port and to keep it up to date, to keep it safe, and those sorts of things. So. I think I'll stop there. It was a really cool meeting. I really appreciate, Lance, that you were able to connect us. I hope to be able to connect with the port in other ways going forward. I think I'll stop there. There was so much. I had like 5 pages of notes on the pour. So if anyone has more questions, I can share my notes. But it was super cool, so I appreciated the opportunity.
All right, I will go ahead and go next. I don't know that the fire department is necessarily like crack in any way, but I really enjoyed the opportunity to connect with the department. So I spoke with Lance was on the call, of course, with Chief Hetrick, Jody Hetrick, the fire chief, and then the deputy chief, as well as a fiscal officer from the department, and they gave a really great overview of their operations. From a budget standpoint, the fire department has a lot of internal capacity, and in terms of its own, as I understand, they have their own dispatch, a lot of their own kind of services. And Lance, am I correct? Do they have their own? They have their own fleet maintenance, I believe, too. Is that right?
That's correct.
And so it is interesting to me how many of their services that are internal to them rather than shared. And I don't have a great sense for the pros and cons of shared versus departmental services like that. But I did ask some tougher questions, and I really appreciated their willingness to engage and answer. But one of the concerns or questions that I've always had on the fire department is concerns the overtime usage, and the overtime usage often causes them to exceed their annual budget. At least it has for a few times over the recent years, and the chief was really good about answering that question and talking about and explaining to me in a way that I hadn't fully understood or appreciated before about the minimum staffing requirements that they have to abide by, and some of those are driven by their collective bargaining agreements. So they have to maintain a certain staff level, and not only a certain staff level each shift, but also a certain number of firefighters of each rank. And so it creates a situation where there's often a very small pool from a certain rank, that has to be drawn from, and so a small number of people can often rack up a lot of overtime. It does necessitate a lot of overtime usage, and so that is somewhat of an issue that they have had over the years, and so I did appreciate understanding that a little bit more. The fire department is mostly for next year their continuation budget. They're not looking for any major increases per se. It's largely going to be continuation of past recent years. I did also ask for their opinion on the Crisis Now model that we learned about it in I think our last meeting, especially. A lot of the fire department is largely driven by EMT response, by medical calls, for ambulance services, and so I wanted to understand how much of that could be offset if there are behavioral health types of needs. And the chief was very supportive and very positive about that type of thinking, and she did mention also that the fire department has I believe one behavioral health person on staff to go along with some of their calls that where there's more of a mental health type of situation that requires response. And so I think that the fire department has been sensitive to that being a driver of some of their paramedic calls of mental health types of needs. So I think that was an important point. I did ask about sometimes when you see these watchdog groups publish like the top salaries at the municipality, a lot of times several of the top ones will be firefighters, and she did explain about the overtime usage, driving a lot of that, and usually the folks that have the high compensation, it's usually they're working a pretty absurd number of hours in order to get that. So I did come away with a good understanding of the department. I appreciated that she was able to answer some of the tougher questions, and I think in a way that I found pretty satisfactory. So I'm going to I will let us move on from there. But I really did appreciate the opportunity, and it was and I definitely want to thank Lance and OMB for setting those up, because I know that was a lot of work to get all of those department heads connected with all of us. So I think next up is who has health?
That's Tasha has health.
Go for it, Tasha.
Yeah, so I think was the last person to connect with my department, and as you guys might imagine, they're pretty busy right now. The Department of Health has a $21.5 million budget, which is 2.3 of the general operating budget. They run 14 programs with 116 employees. And for a city our size, and I'm always interested in this stuff, like what should the numbers be? For a city our size with our population, they should have 164 full-time equivalents. So they're missing about 50 employees to do the work that they do. They partner with 50 organizations. They have some very, I think, dedicated folks that have been working in the department for several decades, and that's always, I think, a true testament to how things are going. But similar to what Jonathan was saying, they're having some challenges with recruitment and having occasionally viewed the vacancies on the Muni site and seeing what those folks get paid. I can see why there's a challenge with that. So that was something that was discussed, was competitive pay, and being able to properly recruit qualified individuals to help provide the services that they do. They do a number of programs through grants, so things like sexual assault, working with homeless shelters, and the Anchorage Safety Patrol. So those kinds of things are done through grants. Some areas of concern that they had noted were that kind of like we're on this commission for the Budget Advisory Commission, they help facilitate 6 commissions, and they're low on, they have very limited administrative support, so that makes it very challenging to operate those commissions, and they're part of, code, so they have to happen, but they don't have any approval authority for what happens next, so I think, doesn't make it as valuable as it could be. They have some infrastructure challenges, so they're, if you've ever been to their building, they're on 9th. It's a wonderful old building. It's a little bit creepy and could probably use some upgrades, but we talked about like how well it did during the earthquake in 2018, and they said, as much as people don't like the facility in terms of it needing upgrades, like it's gonna stand forever unless it gets plowed down. So it's a great location. They do help a number of different people, and I think that they do a great job of leveraging partners in the community. And so I think that's just kind of the highlights that I had. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Tasha. And next up, maintenance and operations. Who had maintenance and operations?
It's me, Lindsay. I did not really prepare this to share, but I think it might be easier to follow along if people can see my screen, so I will let you, this is what I'm kind of going off. I think that it was interesting to learn that, less than half of maintenance and operations budget is really available to it, and I think it's even a smaller percentage than that because some of it's dedicated or committed to contract services, and so they're one of the issues is that their budget appears sort of artificially inflated in terms of what they can actually use for their operations. It's one of the largest departments in the municipality. They have street maintenance, facility maintenance, fleet maintenance, and then they're in charge of communications and electronics. And I think that of this, what was stood out to me was that they maintain 578 municipal vehicles and 455 vehicles for the Anchorage Police Department. I was surprised to learn about the comms and electronics piece. So they maintain the 911, I believe the call center, the mobile tablets that are used for APD, defibrillators. They maintain 3,000 radios, 12 microwave sites between Homer and Connect. So, I mean, it's just a very, very large department tasked with a lot of different responsibilities. I really didn't know that 60% of the APD fleet is at the end of life, when the goal for that should be 10 to 15%. So some of the things that come up when you have such an aging fleet like we do here at the municipality is that repairs are becoming increasingly more expensive as the cars are having a life cycle that they're trying to extend up to 180,000 miles. And I think that the ideal is more like around 110,000. And then an additional issue is that, I think that they're budgeted for 39 full-time employees, but it's really difficult to hire for some of these mechanic positions that are required to maintain this aging fleet. And then I think I had just like a couple of questions from my notes. I wasn't sure. Lance, do you recall what were they saying about the 2.4 million for police vehicles? Has that been approved or is that upcoming?
So both. They asked for 2.4 million in the 2020 bond. It got approved, and so they're buying a fleet for that. And they did ask in the upcoming bond. They asked for the same amount again.
Okay, great. So hopefully that will, offset some of these issues with the aging fleet. And I thought another interesting, on some of the projects that they're working on is the installing solar. And so Fire Station 10 and the Egan Center are a couple of installations of this solar project. And I think it'd be interesting to see, how that performs and how else we can support projects like that going forward. Any questions?
Well, thanks, Lindsay. Okay, let's see. To do a time check here, we've got 8 minutes left, and I wanted to make sure we have a little bit of time to talk about alcohol tax purpose as well. Lance, could we maybe do the rest of the reports on departments? I hate to squeeze that, but can we maybe do those at our next meeting?
Sure.
Or,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah. I will just say that Carla took on 2 departments. That was super cool. And Jonathan, to his effect, he basically took on more than one as well. And I think if Lindy's not at our next meeting, it's probably because she's going to the academy. She might be joining the police force. So anyway, I think that one went well as well. But look forward to her report. So yeah, we'll book them for that. And again, it was more valuable than I thought it was going to be, and I really appreciate it. I hope you guys got as much out of it. I wish. I'm writing down notes, and I know there's recorded, but I think a lot of this stuff can be shared with the mayor because it was good. I could go on, but it was good. Thank you.
Yes, and thank you, Lance.
On the alcohol tax, the purpose of it, I don't have much more to add except that I wanted to maybe just reiterate what Suzanne LaFrance mentioned. I think the Assembly is looking for some suggestions and guidance from you. I sent to you the notice of the meetings that they had yesterday, or when was it, Tuesday and tonight. They also have some other work coming up. I think they're planning to put together their plan for the alcohol tax in August, at the end of August, or maybe even in September. I think it's actually in September, which is a little bit late, but that's the plan for that. If you guys want more information, I really haven't had my head on the alcohol tax, to be honest with you, in 2 or 3 weeks. I've been working on budget. But if you guys want to schedule another work session, probably maybe later this month, but I think in after your September meeting to talk about specifically about the alcohol tax, that would probably be ideal. That way we can blend that into our budget discussion. So that's my thought on there. You guys should have a resolution probably right after your September meeting, maybe your October meeting, because that's what's going to be allocated in the 21 budget. So think about that,
So
Nolan, and
Lance,
let me
the
know what you.
timing,
Go ahead.
sorry, Lance, the timing for alcohol tax, that, when that actually gets decided, when it gets enacted, it is with the 2021 budget. That's the.
Yes. So what we will, yes, the alcohol tax goes into effect in February of next year. We're going to put together a budget that includes the allocation of the alcohol tax, and I will look at Treasury's estimates, but I think it's like 11 or 12 million dollars in money, and then we have the ability to adjust that in August. So, but yes, we will allocate or project the allocation of the alcohol tax as part of our 21 budget.
Okay. And then I'm also trying to think as far as our bandwidth for work session goes. You know, I think we probably, you know, I think we also probably need to weigh in on CARES as well. I think there's a lot at play. There's just a lot to. There's a lot of areas where our engagement could be useful and helpful. And so I realize we're kind of we're finite in our time and our ability to engage. But I'm also wondering about that as a topic.
So I would suggest this. I don't know if you. I think as a commission, your role is to advise on policy and programs and budget. And I would take a look at what the Assembly's proposals in that handout and see if you have any strong feelings, plus or minus, or if there are some pieces or parts that are missing, or parts of it that should be more emphasized than others. I think that would be a good place to start. I think it would probably be difficult to secure, X amount of so much money to a particular program for an X amount of time. But I think if you think about, should we be spending money on, I think in those three categories: prevention, public safety, and that Suzanne was mentioning. So I think on the CARES money, think about where those categories of money ought to go. And then on the alcohol tax, I think you got a little bit more time, but not much. So for CARES, look and see what the Assembly's got together. I think the administration is pretty close. And maybe at your September meeting, you put together a resolution in that arena, where we start doing that. So I can follow your lead, Nolan.
I'd like to hear from the BAC members. What do you guys, when it comes to the priorities, that are in front of us, when it comes to alcohol tax and CARES and everything else, where do you feel like we should put more of our time?
Are you talking about between CARES or alcohol tax?
And anything else. But yeah, I think those are the two big ones.
I think CARES is very important right at this moment. Not that alcohol tax isn't, but I think CARES to me is right more present.
This is Tasha. I agree with Carla. I think the main reason would be we know how much CARES money is coming in, and the alcohol tax money is still really uncertain what that amount is to try to allocate it.
Sure. Anybody else?
This is Lindsay. I agree with Tasha and Carla.
This is Jimmy. I do as well. I think CARES is obviously the most pressing thing going on in the world right now.
Yeah, and I'm inclined to agree. The time pressure, the amount of money on the table, it does feel like a high priority area. I think maybe this calls for a work session. I don't know if folks agree with that or not. But I think we need to be able to think about it at some length, I think, as a group, and devote some time to it. My general feel. So I kind of feel like maybe a work session on that would be time well spent on CARES.
I can look at the 20th of August, the 27th of August, and then we're scheduled to meet on the 3rd of September. If you guys want to get on the CARES, I can send out a doodle poll. I think the 20th there is an Assembly Budget and Finance Committee at noon that I have to attend. So it won't be able to do it at noon on the 20th. It would have to be before then. But I can look at calendars and I can have Lila send out a doodle poll for those days, unless there's other days that you prefer.
Let's do a doodle poll.
Okay.
With those days that work for you, Lance, and figure out where we have a alignment.
Okay.
And let's see. And with that, I guess our next scheduled meetings are September 3rd and October 1st and November 5th. And of course, we'll be ramping up regular budget season, of review and items to discuss there. So I think, there's no shortage of stuff for us to be thinking about. But I think we are over for today. So I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
Lindsay, motion to adjourn.
Tasha, second.
All right, very good. Then thank everyone for your times today. Plenty of exciting stuff to think about. So everyone enjoy the rest of your week. Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks.